God is known to speak when a voice is not commonly heard, when no one hears from God. Shalom again, this is Yalak. It is Sunday, September 24, 2017. And I want to share here with you from the book of Samuel, from Samuel chapter 3, and my lesson is entitled, When Samuel Heard. Before I get into it, I really want to say thanks to all the people who have been listening to my lessons, and I think you can tell that I'm not the usual kind of teacher that you've been used to in the camps. You can tell that I'm trying to find my way on my own, not out of disrespect for what others are doing, but it may come across like that, but that's a misunderstanding of what I'm trying to do. It is just that if you have searched for the Most High all your life, after a while, when you realize the other ways aren't working, you've just had enough. And so, having sat in the Christian church for most of my life, and I was one of those who was passionate about reading the Bible and teaching it and sharing whatever I knew and learning from other people and so on. I always had, in the days of Walkmans, before the portable CD player even came around, I always had a Walkman listening to some music as I walked to school or whatever I was doing. I was always listening to music and preaching, but a lot of times it was preaching that I was listening to from the Christian church. I used to recite on my way to and from school, sometimes on some parts of the roads, for roads that were not busy on my way to school. I would recite almost word for word the messages that my pastor at the time, who's now retired, had preached so often. He's now retired. This is Bishop Ira D. Thompson. And that's from, for those of you who know, listening to me, it's from 20 South Kemp Road, Bethel United Church of Jesus Christ Apostolic in Kingston, Jamaica. That's the church I really grew up in. And the word got a hold of me so much, I would listen to his messages over and over again. I would repeat them to myself, recite them while the Walkman was playing, and it got to a point where without the Walkman I could just repeat them word for word. I was just preaching along with him on my way to school and back home. And so the word got a hold of me from a small child. Reading the Bible was a mysterious thing to me because the book looked so strange. The most mysterious part was the Old Testament, but of course, being in the Christian church, you're more focused on the New Testament, so that's just the way it was. But the Old Testament always seemed mysterious. Now, something else that seemed mysterious to me was this Jesus Christ figure in the New Testament. I always wondered, how did he grow up? What was he like? He was just a small boy. He was just a small boy. At age 12, he was mesmerizing some rabbis or some teachers, and then he disappeared. Next time he shows up, he's about 30 years old, and the rest of his life happens. I always wondered, did he eat regular food like we eat? What if he's God? Because they told us he was God, which I understand now he's not. But if he was God, what kind of food would God eat? What was he like? Did he play games when he was a child? Did he laugh as an adult with the disciples? Did he laugh? Did he crack jokes and so on? Or if Peter or one of them said something, did he laugh back as well because he genuinely found it funny? Did he kick back in a shade sometimes, laying down in the grass under a tree with all them just resting and in the shade and the cool of the day or whatever? I wondered these things. I could never get an understanding properly. It was just not covered. It was just not taught. And so that kind of mystery as well surrounded my thoughts about the Bible, because it was just kind of strange. God came in flesh and he was walking like a man and so on. And what was he like? What would it have been like to have been there to see him for myself and so on? Now I understand things differently about the New Testament. As you know from my series on the New Testament is fake. But the mystery still remains, that there is this being that we've never seen. We've never talked with him the way we talk with other people, by looking them in their eyes and seeing their mouths move as well, and seeing their eyes look like they're trying to process what we're saying so they can respond and so on. This whole thing of God, or the Creator, has always been of interest to me. And I've always considered the scriptures strongly. The first time I heard about a Bible college, I wanted to go there. I just wanted to learn about God. Now that I'm older, I realize that religious information is the number one, hands down, biggest kind of information worldwide. To the point where kings and politicians today use religious thought or religion to help them to run the world. Because there is something that just never dies. The knowledge of God, and the scripture does say that the knowledge of God is going to be everywhere eventually. I've got some thoughts about that I want to share in another video. But just the knowledge of the Creator, we're wondering, what's all this life about and so on, whatever. But finding God has always been interesting to me. And to know that we've got this book that we call the Bible today that says he spoke to people in times past. Now, it is my belief that he still speaks today, this very day. As I've told you before, I don't think the regular way that the other teachers teach, and I'm not insulting anyone. I would be the last person to, because I have less knowledge of Torah than everyone else who has been before me. I'm just starting to learn this. But I'm not scared to say that he speaks to people today, because my eyes are being opened and I'm starting to see now certain tricks with how the Bible has been presented to us. You see, if the God of Israel had stopped moving, there would have been no need for the Romans and for the nations of the earth, as in Psalm 83, to have covered things up. In order for you to not identify that the Most High is speaking and speaking to you, that he spoke in older times has to be either covered up or relegated to a period of time in history that is classified as being archaic, old, or cast in some kind of way that makes it come across to you as being times of old. So you will never believe that he can speak to you. If you are not Isaiah, if you are not Jeremiah, if you are not Moses, he cannot speak to you. The problem I'm having here, which I'm going to show from 1 Samuel chapter 3, is that if the Creator has stopped speaking, then the emotions and or the feelings that come along, the sensations that come along with his speaking, should have also disappeared. In other words, the presence that accompanied the voice of God should not be felt today by anyone if God has stopped speaking. And so religious authorities make it their business to convince you, especially if you are one of the children of Jacob, that you really aren't hearing from God today, and the only way to hear from God is through the pages of the Bible, who they published who they hold the old records to, who they edit every time they find a new scroll. They keep it for 20 or 30 years, and when they're through doing whatever they wish to do to it, they present it to you and tell you, this is exactly how we found it. When there are some out there, some experts who will tell you that when you look at some of the scrolls, like the Dead Sea Scrolls and other scrolls, they will tell you even the word Yahweh, the YHWH, has been inserted into the scroll skillfully by experts. So who's wrong, who's right? Others make you feel like if you are not well known and so on, that God couldn't be speaking to you, and so basically you shouldn't stand up and open your mouth. You should only learn from the guardians of God's holiness. Now look in 1 Samuel chapter 3 and verse 1, I will read. And I told you in a recording some time ago from Samuel how the scriptures are saying that Samuel was ministering and so on, but he did not yet know the Lord. So he was basically doing all this stuff. He had the presence of Torah, the knowledge of Torah. He knew about the Most High and so on. But he didn't know the Most High. I mean, that's just crazy right there. But 1 Samuel chapter 3 and verse 1 says, "And the child Samuel ministered unto the Most High before Eli. And the word of the Most High was precious in those days. There was no open vision." Notice here something that you can think about yourself in this time, because people are popping up and doing their teachings about quote-unquote God, because they feel they have heard from God, or they are being driven by the Most High to speak. So obviously to those people, he still speaks. But the text here is saying to me that if the word of the Most High was precious in those days, it is letting you come away with an understanding that in all times the word of the Most High should have been or was common, to the point where the writer has to express something to you that it was actually an odd thing that in this particular period of time in Samuel's life and in Eli's time, as is in the text as well, that something different was going on, that the word coming from the Most High was rare. But it should not have been like that, and it was not like that prior. So when there was no Eli, when there was no Samuel, when there was no this, that, and the other kind of person, the word of the Most High was still going on. When there was no super famous mega church kind of person, the word of the Most High was still known. There would have been no way to pass on the word of the Most High from Adam unto Samuel and unto later prophets if the word of the Most High was not commonly known all throughout. Understand that even 8 people could not have been saved in the ark of Noah if the word of the Most High was not known and was not being preserved. In fact, the word of the Most High came unto Noah because the word of the Most High was still going on. It's just that most people decided to ignore that word. But Noah, who heeded the instruction of the Most High, found grace in the eyes of the Lord. So the word was precious because there was no open vision. Notice here that if the word coming from out of heaven was precious, it is not telling you that there was no Hebrew Israelite camp that was duplicating itself in many cities. It's not telling you that there was no mega church here and there and many other smaller churches all over the place populating many lands, many countries. But the word was precious. Because the text itself is also letting us know that this child Samuel was ministering unto the Most High. He could not have been doing that unto the Most High if there was not a place set up that represented the presence of the Most High and represented the word, or represented that which grew out of the Most High, that we would more call a house of God or a temple or something like that today. So that which the word of the Most High had established was being used, was being propagated, was being, it was visible before the Most High. This was the house of the Most High. But the word just wasn't flowing anymore. But what was heard was preserved. So there was still no absence. There was just not a dynamic flow of the word. But the word that was prior given was being preserved as much as it could have been. And the preservation of this word is shown in the text by saying that the child Samuel ministered. He was ministering based on a word that Eli had received before, and Eli had kept that word alive and was teaching him until eventually the light went out, which is showing that things were drying up as far as the word was concerned. Now, if I read from this commentary, Interpreter's One Volume Commentary on 1 Samuel chapter 3 verse 1, it says here, for a little title that they've put on 1 Samuel 3 verse 1 to 4, Yahweh's appearance to Samuel. I'll read it. This passage combines the call of Samuel to prophethood with another denunciation of the house of Eli. The setting for the story emphasizes the rarity of such an oracle, the auditory and visual nature of which is emphasized in chapter 3 and verse 1. Samuel, as a young ministrant, is asleep when he hears his name called, and naturally waits on Eli, his master, who on the third occasion realizes that Yahweh is calling the boy. It's funny, I wasn't planning on reading this part, but he goes on in verse 10 to 8 saying, the oracle summarizes the divine intent to destroy Eli's house. And I'm going to put that in another lesson I've got with the same Samuel chapter 3 and verse 1. But notice there that the word is coming at a time when there was a drought of the word, a drying up of the word. The word is coming at a time when someone's going to be raised up, and those who were famously known prior to that is about to be destroyed. The word of the Most High was precious in those days, for there was no open vision. It's telling you at a time when the light was going out for Eli, the light was going out in the temple, symbolizing the absence of the divine presence or move of God, as sometimes we might say. This is a time in which the impossible by today's standards actually happened. Because they tell us today that people do not hear from God. But the scriptures which we should use as our precept is telling us at a time when God was not heard from, when he did not speak. At such a time, somebody heard God's voice. So when people are telling you today that you cannot hear from God, are you going to believe them, or are you going to search out the voice that you believe in your heart you have heard? That's a question you need to really ask yourself. Why do people who are running their churches, you get these jealous pastors who try to not help you to start your own churches and so on, or they style for you because they don't want you to launch out and so on. The same with the Hebrew camps. as well. Why do all these people who say they have heard from God themselves, even though apparently God doesn't speak to people anymore, try to squash you when you get up to speak if you have not heard from God? Because it's simple. If you never heard from God, if God is not driving you and moving you to do things, why are they threatened? Because if God is not behind you getting up, nothing will come of it. Because their teaching is skillful, where they use the Torah to make you feel or to condition your mind to think that as long as they are not backing you and not with you, and they don't have your kind of, you don't have their kind of views and their following, that God is not with you. Even though when they started out on day one, they never had 10,000 views immediately either. But their diligence after 20 years has gotten them only a mere 10 or 20,000 views. When someone can put something out there on the airwaves or online in the line of politics or just feeding your dog and get 100,000 views after a few months. So when people heard from the Most High in the Bible, it was usually accompanied with a sensation that made them aware that they heard from an unseen source that drove them to speak or do something. That sensation was so evident that even today, when you read a chopped up, botched up translation of the Bible, that you hate to have to buy such a modern version, you still sense something coming off the pages of that modern book, even though it is about something that happened thousands of years ago. Because the word of the Most High travels still through the centuries, through the thousands of years, till a modern publishing company prints those same words in a different language than it was spoken and written before. And you still have that same sensation that the presence of God is in my room when I read this. But they tell you God does not speak today. I'm telling you, at a time when people will say God is not speaking in this land anymore, some nut would have probably wanted to get up and question Samuel and say, how could God have spoken to you? He is not speaking. There is no open vision. If Eli isn't hearing a word from God anymore, how are you going to hear it? And you are just a child. You are unskillful in the word. How can you hear from him? And as soon as you rise up today to speak something that you are driven to speak, it drives you with crazy madness in your own house. I must share this. I must speak it. I cannot hold this anymore. I must share this in the way that I know I can share it. The guardians of God's domain, of his word of revelation, rise up to convince everyone else who they know that they should discredit you because you have not heard from God, because only they know that God speaks. But in a time when there was no open vision, the Most High of Israel spoke unto Samuel. After a long time of silence where it could be confirmed there is no open vision, nobody seeing or hearing anything or sensing anything. Just like today, after a long time when we think, oh, the God of the Old Testament is gone away, after a long time, Samuel heard a voice breaking through the silence. Notice when the Most High breaks through with that silence. Not when Eli was in his heyday, because he would have probably been like, you aren't breaking through this one, Samuel. You got to sit down and pay your dues first. He comes to at a time when Eli is about to expire. Eli, in desperate attempt to keep the fire in Israel going on, does not have any fight left in him to fight down anybody, the new person that's coming up, because you got to rise up now, Samuel, because this thing just can't die. See, the Most High is smarter than all of us. He waits until the stalwarts of revelation are put in a corner where people aren't looking to them anymore because people are looking to be fed, so they turn their ears away toward the person who says, I got something from the Most High. There's a fresh new word coming out of heaven. If we read in verse 3, it says, and ere the lamp of the Most High went out in the temple. You know, went out? When you can't connect anymore with all the teachings you're getting from everybody who's teaching about God, and you feel like this whole business of God has dried up. When your soul is just desperate, you just want to hear something. You want to be fed. You want something from the Creator. It's just like stuff that you've been hearing just doesn't satisfy you anymore. You are searching, you're looking because you're wondering, does God still speak? When it went out in the temple of the Most High, where the ark of the Most High was, and Samuel was laid down to sleep, that the Most High called Samuel, and he answered, here am I. Notice what Samuel was doing at the time when this word broke through. It said Samuel was laid down, not just to rest, not just sipping on some hot tea. He was laid down to sleep in a death-like state, in a selfish kind of state. Not selfish in a mean state, but when you sleep, that is selfish. In other words, it's something you do that benefits your own self. He was laid down. He wasn't up and running trying to find God. He was just about his own business, like Moses was just about his own business and a bush was just burning. It just came to him just out of the blues like that. It's like Amos, it's like Amos wasn't there trying to be one of the biggest, baddest prophets. He's like, hey, I was busy just working in the field, tending the trees and whatever. And a voice just called me. Say, get up and prophesy these things. And so when Samuel was just doing something that doesn't seem biblical, it doesn't seem like Torah is telling him to do this kind of stuff, to minister unto Israel, he was just laid down. And something just broke through and got to him. That is the time when he heard the voice of the Most High. It came to him when he was laid down to sleep. Not when he was busy actively paying his way and paying his dues to others and selling out and doing whatever and working hard in advertising and so on to get 20,000, 30,000 views on YouTube. It came when he was laid down, not when he had advertised himself in great ways to get all the listenership that he could get. It came when he was laid down at a time when he didn't have viewers, at a time when he didn't have followers. It came at a time when nobody knew his name, when he wasn't doing anything because he was laid down. The voice came at a time when he was not a mega church. The voice came at a time when he was not laying down to get some rest, to strategize how to. It came when he was just laying down to go into a death-like state, like, there's nothing else left for me to do for the rest of this day. There's nothing else left for me. I'm just going to sleep. It's done. Tomorrow I get up to the same run of the mill. I'm just going to serve again in the temple. It came. He wasn't staying up, flipping through 5 more commentaries to find the right Hebrew word. It came at a time when he was just laying down. It came at a time when he wasn't trying to figure out through all the precepts of Torah how the light could have gone out under Eli's watch. It came at a time when he wasn't trying to figure out the baddest words for the Hebrew. to understand how the lamp could have gone out. It came at a time when he's like, I give up. I'm just going to go to sleep. And the Most High spoke when there was no open vision. And they tell me God does not speak to people today. When the precept shows me God is known to speak when a voice is not commonly heard, when no one hears from God.